Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to Wisdom from North, the Nordic platform for personal development and spiritual growth. I'm Jannike, and if you're new to my channel, welcome here. As always, I would love for you to subscribe. You do that below, and if you click the bell, you get notifications of my new videos. Today, I'm really excited to be here with Rodolfo Young. Rodolfo is a sought-after speaker and author within the fields of personal development and relationship and happiness. He's also a TEDx speaker, and his mission is to inspire 1 million hearts to live in their full brilliance. We're also very excited to have him as one of our masterclass teachers in Wisdom from North membership, where he's teaching the class removing the barriers to self-love. And if you want a spiritual community with like-minded people from all over the world and have access to masterclasses with teachers that I have handpicked for you, then come and join us in the membership. You can read all about it in the link below. Now, let's meet Rodolfo and learn from his perspectives. Hello, Rodolfo. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good, Jannike. Thank you so much for having me on to give a masterclass and right now to just kind of introduce and share a bit with your audience.
Yeah, I recently discovered you through a mutual friend of ours, and I know you live in Bali, and I think your teaching is really amazing. Your masterclass is so deep, and it's really teaching us how to remove those barriers to self-love, which I interpreted as means that we do have all the self-love we need. It's just we accumulate a lot of barriers towards it. So for anyone interested, you can learn more about this in the masterclass. But today I'd love to learn more about your story, Rodolfo, because you were thriving as a spiritual teacher many years ago, speaking, having talks and sharing the stage with people like Deepak Chopra and like big teachers. And then in 2011, something happened. You had a shift and you went into silence for 2 years. I'm curious about learning what happened.
Sure. So this is often a subject of interest when people find out, especially that I'm a professional speaker in personal development, in transformational growth. And then they find out that as a speaker, I went silent. It doesn't seem to match. The truth of it is that in 2011, at the beginning of 2011, actually was one of my best years. I had just given a TEDx talk a little bit before that. I was living here in Bali and making plans and negotiating with the governor of Bali to make this huge conscious project here. There was so much amazing positive things happening in my life. And to put the cherry on the top of the cake, my partner at that time, she came to me and she said, "I'm pregnant." And I remember thinking, wow, for everything that I've achieved, all that stuff you just shared in my intro and the people that I've gotten to share stages with and all the growth I've done, to think that I was about to become a father, this felt like this was the purpose. This is why I'm here. This is why I've learned everything I have and that I've developed in the way so that I can now share that with my own offspring. And as things started to develop, a very big insight, I guess, in life came up. And it was that everything in life has both its ups and its downs. We have always the parallel opposites, right? And the up obviously was all of this. The down, and the down of life doesn't mean it's negative. It just means that we're going through the valleys that come back up into the mountains. But a lot of us haven't learned how to fall with grace. And that was definitely me in 2011. Towards the middle of the year, my partner miscarried, and so we lost the baby. That caused so much turmoil in the relationship that I lost the relationship. And all of that pretty much it left me feeling like a massive failure. I felt like I had failed the very purpose that I was here in the world. Everything that I had put all my intention, all my excitement and inspiration, finding out that I was going to be a father, all of a sudden was wiped away. And there was a story going on in my head that said, yeah, you weren't worthy. And that's the reason I went into silence. because not only was my heart broken, but so was my confidence. And I know human nature. What we do is we go out into the world and we distract ourselves when we have had a massive disturbance or a trauma or any form of big challenge in our life. So many of us go out and we just distract ourselves, or we try to fix it by filling in the cracks. But we don't really take the time to just sit with it and feel into what's really going on, feel into what's really truly there. And I had already done some practices with silence. I knew the power of it. I thought, okay, I'm going to do 365 days of silence. I'm going to go inward and I'm going to heal my heart.
Can I
And that
just
was the intention.
Can I just ask you, because I get curious before we learn about the silence period, as a spiritual teacher, didn't you sort of know your intrinsic value, that you are valuable? Because I'm curious about that. You probably knew it deep down. So why do you think this came up so big for you?
This is a great question. Regardless of whether I was and am a spiritual teacher, or no matter how much wisdom I might have or learning, we're all human. And we all have these blind spots. We all have triggers that just haven't been activated, right? And so we get to a certain point in our lives, we're like, wow, I've mastered this thing called humanity. And then all of a sudden something comes along, we're like, I did not see that coming. How is that still in me? It was simply just a part, a piece, a shadow, something we probably neglected or ignored. And it looks for acknowledgement. And so it comes up. And I think this for me was one of the biggest ones. And as I said, everything in life is an up and down. So on the mountaintop, we can look out on the world and our life and feel like we've got it all handled. But we forget that in life, you're going to be up and then you're going to come down. And in the valley, things aren't so clear. And so, again, regardless of how much experience and wisdom I may have had in the role that I was playing, it doesn't mean that it's a consistent perfection or that one is infallible. And I think this is a really important thing to think with anybody who's a teacher or an example or a role model, is to realize they're also human. And in giving them that, we also give them permission to be vulnerable, to be open, and to be able to handle these kind of events in their lives with a little bit more grace.
So then you went into the silence with the intention to sort of sit with it or to learn something from it. I'm curious about, was this sort of a strategy to handle it better or to get to know yourself better?
It was exactly that. It was to get to know myself better, to try to figure out what had really been triggered, what my belief was, and I started off with 1 year, so 365 days. That was in towards the end of 2000. No, actually, towards the middle of 2012 is when I started. 2011 is when things kind of all went bad, and then around the middle of 2012. I decided, okay, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to see what's really going on. And I remember even as I got towards the end of that year, because of all the apocalyptic messages and ideas of 2012 is going to be the end of the world, or at least the jump in consciousness, in December, I actually went into a 21-day fast. And so I'd already been in silence for a long time. Then I went into 21 days of fasting, and then I added a bunch of really powerful breath work. And my thought was, if the world's going to end, I'm going to ascend. I'm going somewhere else before this happens. But obviously, nothing happened at the end of 2012. I passed through it. And I got to the end of this year. And as I was nearing the end, I asked myself, does my heart feel full again? Does it feel fixed? Does it feel healed? And there was a voice in my head that said, no, it doesn't. And I remember thinking to myself, I was having a little inner dialogue. I'm like, wait, so I just did a year of silence and nothing? Nothing has changed? Oh, man.
Wow.
And that was actually the moment in which another insight came in. And it was probably the biggest lesson that I got to learn out of that year. It was that during that year, I had been telling myself something. It was, I'm spending a year to fix my broken heart. I'm spending a year to fix my broken heart. So what was my conscious mind or my unconscious mind listening to? It was saying, I have a broken heart, it needs to be fixed. And I kept repeating that story for the entire year. So of course, at the end of the year, I don't feel like my heart's been broken. I just feel even more, or fixed. I feel even more like it's a broken heart because I've solidified that story. And that was the insight that we are functioning from our stories so much more in life than we are from the reality of who we are. And that's what now my entire mission to inspire a million hearts and the company I founded, the Brilliance mission and the Brilliance Center here in Bali, it's all about taking those layers off. And as we do that, we take the layers of story away. We start dropping back into the authenticity and the vulnerability of who we really are and the potential of ourselves.
Well, that's interesting. I get many questions there because let's see, we have broken up with somebody and we have a broken heart. That is sort of the reality in the present moment. And by saying that or trying to tell a new story, well, my heart is not broken, wouldn't we sort of bypass that pain? So how would we go about it then?
Is to look at it a little bit different. You're very correct that it's really easy to end up bypassing it and not acknowledging what's there. This is the example I can give. Imagine that you have a blank sheet of paper, and that blank sheet of paper is your potential. It's who you really are. It's this blank canvas ready for the masterpiece of your life. And then you draw something on there. And now that's an expression of your life. Maybe it's a little dot or a line. And now there's an expression on your life. And then maybe you decide later because somebody else comes along and says, oh, that's not a very nice dot. And you're like, oh, well, I don't like my dot. Something's wrong with my dot. Something must be wrong with the expression I have. But that's not actually what we think. We think something is wrong with me. We don't realize it was just the expression. We don't realize that the paper, the potential, the canvas that's truly you, that's not changed. But the expression got judged and compared against. And that's the same thing when our hearts feel broken, what's happened is the identity that we have has been hurt. And that's just an expression of ourselves, of our potential. If we can start to make that distinction, then we don't bypass, but we really just start realizing, okay, these things and emotions and feelings and reactions to life are just possible expressions, and I can choose a different expression. That's not ignoring what the expression is, but not also sitting in it as a story of identity.
So the heart is actually never really broken in a sense.
Exactly.
So then you went into another year and you talk about that you gave room to or you gave space and room. I'm curious then how your approach was in that second year of silence.
Yes, so 2 years later, in 2017, I went back into silence. And a lot of it was because over those 2 years, I had started building a strong identity around what I was teaching and different things. And I noticed that when people would ask me things or I would be in a group situation, I'd be sharing, probably 70 to 80% of what I was sharing was to bolster, defend, or cultivate some form of identity. You know, a lot of us do this in our branding and business, and it's almost unavoidable because it's just a part of this. But I really didn't like that this was coming into my private life, that I was using conversations to try to prove who I was. And so this is why I went back into the silence for another year, was to see what wanted to come up. And in so doing, I was creating a pause, a gap between expression and what was being seen of me and the purpose of it. So let's say if I was, again, in a group situation during this year of silence and something wanted to come up that was about my identity, I would just let it go. And I would just kind of be in the flow of whatever's happening in that moment. If it was something of value, meaning it would contribute to the group and not just to me feeling better about myself, then I would find a way, whether it was writing it or making weird body gestures so that people could figure it out. Uh, but yeah, this was the purpose of the second year. And what occurred in that was this space, and this space of allowing for expression instead of regurgitating expression. I think a lot of times we're just repeating the same things, solidifying identities, protecting identity, but we're not really actually in the moment giving that space to see what's valuable to share right now. What's valuable to be even in presence right now. And sometimes it's just to listen.
Wow. I'm curious to learn what more you found and the practicality with it, not being able to speak. What were other discoveries you found in silence for those who feel like maybe this can be for them, maybe for not a whole year, but for a limited time, maybe a month or a week or so?
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing a whole year at the beginning. Yeah, maybe start with a day, and then if you like it, do a week. Um, what I found is one of the things that most people will say, even statistics will tell you this, that body language speaks much louder than our words. Our words have different definitions and interpretations based on our history. Body language, you kind of get based off of what's going on for the person. You can feel emotion, you can empathize with what's coming through. And so being in silence, it allowed me to have much deeper connections with people. I even actually, my wife, who I met in silence, so we've been together for 5 years. It was in the last 3 months of my second year of silent practice that our courtship occurred. And to be able to go into such deep connection with somebody creates such a foundation. You see the result. I've married this woman. So this was probably one of the other things that was really big about that silence is it took away the barriers that sometimes our words create.
So you met her during the silence, like you did not speak, you just had a connection.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I heard a story many years ago. I think it was actually 2011. It was a Zen podcast. And there was this guy that was in silence with this group. And he had like an attraction to this other woman who also were silent. And he started making so many stories about what, you know, he would say to her and how they were a perfect match. And he created all these stories. And after those 3 months, when she started speaking and he started speaking, he just understood that it was totally wrong. He had just made all these stories up in his head in his silent period. And I was just thinking about that. So this was sort of the opposite. So I guess you cultivated a real connection.
Yeah.
And
I will admit my wife wouldn't make our relationship official until I came out of the silence. She wanted to make sure that the character that I was, the way and presence that I had continued when I started to speak.
right, right, makes sense. Um, you are passionate about connection, and you speak about connection in relationship to the present moment and giving space. Can you talk a little bit about connection? Because I know also that you struggled with connection as a young boy.
Yeah, so and I'll give a little bit of that context. When I was younger, I think I knew the power of connection. I knew how much respect and honoring and value there is when we have physical touch or when we have a connection, even through eye contact, when we're present with each other. There's so much that gets transferred in that. And at that time, and this was even all the way up through high school and maybe a little bit of college, I would have trouble walking by somebody and having to touch them on the shoulder to ask them for me to go by to say, excuse me. And I did something at that point to help myself get over that. And I joined the military. And so I was special ops actually for 6 years. When I came out of that, I had kind of numbed myself a little bit enough to this fear of connection, or at least the sensitivity I had, that I could start approaching it and then playing with it and finding, okay, where's the balance point of this? And what I've noticed is the power of connection is still there. And if we can approach it from a place of safety or a place of no agenda, that's essentially, for me, that's what safety means. That we are interacting with each other with no agenda. We're just curious to know of each other. We're interested in each other's lives. When we do that, then the identities that we have, the comfort zones, the mechanisms that we've created to create safety for ourselves don't feel threatened by somebody else wanting to either take or add or anything to our reality, but rather to be shown an interest and a curiosity. This really opens us up. And all of a sudden you have a much deeper connection because you're not connecting out of what you want from the other person, but actually from what you see in the other person.
Can you perhaps guide us through, give us some examples in a practical way? I'm thinking about the scenario where you either at a party, and often, you know, when a group has certain common things they talk about, it's difficult to come in if you, for instance, don't have children, you're not married, or everybody's single and you are married, and you don't share those common interests, and they start speaking about something and you sort of don't have anything to contribute because you don't know, you're not in the same situation. And I think a lot of people can recognize that situation, that you're sort of not in the group but you want to be social. What would we do in that situation?
Yeah, it's a perfect example to use. So earlier I said that sometimes just listening is a really, really powerful contribution. And then also, again, this curiosity. So often we approach a conversation, whether it's one-on-one or in a group, trying to figure out, okay, what can I say to show that I have value for this and that I'm a good contribution to this, and that I look good in this, or that I can feel validated or acknowledged, or all these things. And this is where we were trying to just defend or bolster our own identity. Whereas the most valuable thing we can actually share is to ask another about them. So let's say you walked into this group, they're all talking about their children and their families, and you don't have the context of experience for it. And you walk in there, you can do one of two things. You can feel inadequate because you don't have that, or you can be curious. And you can say, wow, I don't have children yet. What would you think is the number one blessing that you find of having children? And what's the biggest challenge? You ask parents this, they're going to start talking all day long. They'll love you because they're like, oh, finally, somebody I can share some of this wisdom that I have with, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I think we're all insecure in social settings. And I see a lot of my friends, you know, they go towards like the people they know, but I always like to get to know new people. Because I think we feel safe with those we know, and we know what to talk about. But presence, you speak about presence. So is it something about enduring also being uncomfortable, not having anything to say, and still being there, not removing yourself necessarily from the situation, but okay, so nobody speaks to me, but I can still stand here and listen, even though I don't contribute with that anything, and I can just be in that. I don't know if that's something to practice.
There's definitely something to practice. When I was in my years of silence, I had many awkward moments where I would walk into a group, and especially if they didn't know that I was in silence, and I just stand there.
That's brave.
And, oh yeah, it took a lot of courage. And I remember a few times people would look at me and either and this is where the presence part comes in. If you come in and you're not coming in as if you're seeking something, and it's an energetic quality, it's a quality of softness, I guess. If you come in and it feels like you're looking for something, then people will turn and say, can I help you? Is there something you'd like? And then there's really an awkwardness because you're kind of intruding. But if you can enter again with this curiosity, and instead, and you're even acknowledging somebody else's chatter, whatever they're saying in dialogue, they don't even question it. Like, most of the time, people wouldn't even notice that I didn't belong or that I wasn't speaking. They would just be like, "Oh yeah, here's another person," and continue talking. Actually, most of the time, people confused and thought that I was speaking, and they would talk to me the next day and be like, "Oh, such a great conversation we were having. Like, what do you think of this?" And I just look at them silently, and then it would dawn on them. They're like, "Wait, you weren't talking at all last night. Wait, do you talk?"
You speak about brilliance. I'd love to speak a little bit about that, or learn how we can find that full brilliance, because I know that is your mission.
Yeah, and obviously it's the wording that I've used for my company, for the center I have here. The idea of brilliance to me is, if we imagine that there's this light within us and it's this radiance of how we get to express and be seen. It's like this little sun deep inside of us. That's our radiance, that's our brilliance. What we've done over life is we've piled on layers of conditioning, we've put barriers of protection, we've layered on influences and all sorts of other things. And of course, then that brilliance gets dimmed. And because we forgot that we started with the brilliance, like if you look at, I can give a very easy real world example. When you look at a child and you see into their eyes, or you look at their smile, or how they explore and look at the world, you're not thinking, "Oh, what a heavy, dim little child." No, you think, "Wow, there's something beautiful in this child. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's an innocence, or essentially it's that they haven't weighed themselves down with all this conditioning. They haven't layered on top of that true self." And so that's what that brilliance is to me. My whole mission then is to help people recognize the stories, the layers, the conditioning, the protections that we have placed around us, and to start releasing and letting go of the things that no longer benefit them, so that they can actually start to show the world who they really are.
And that is possible. We can let go of our stories. Is it a mind thing that I should practice not thinking about my story, catching myself, oh, that's the story?
It's partly that, like, we can use a very mechanical approach and catch a story and go, "Okay, that's a story, let me change it." And this is a lot of therapy and hypnosis and NLP and things like this. They work at that level where you're essentially swapping stories. What I like to teach is to become aware of what a story is and why the story is. And so we start to understand, okay, what's the reason that I've made this story? Why do I believe this? Or why am I acting in this way? And almost every time when we start to dig into it, it's because we were trying to find safety or comfort, or pretty much just those two, actually, safety and comfort. We were looking for that, and we found a coping mechanism, or we made up a reality or a reason for why we didn't have it, and that's the story. When we realize that, then we can ask a very simple question. And it's this: anytime that we're getting too much in our heads, or we think we're in a story, or life just doesn't feel like what we would like it to be, we would like something more free and open, we can ask, do I feel safe right now? Do I feel safe right now? And maybe even more specifically, am I safe right now? Because if you say, do I feel, our mind will be like, no, I don't feel safe right now. There's things going on out of my control and uncertainty and ah. But if we actually say, am I safe right now? Is my life threatened right now? And if you have the luxury to ask that question, I can guarantee you are safe in that moment. Because if you don't have the ability or the time to ask that question, then you're just responding. You're not asking questions and thinking about it. You get out of the way of the danger. When you do that, we get out of the amygdala, we get out of the survival brain, and we can come into this more conscious, problem-solving, creative part of our brains. And from there, we can start to look at, okay, what stories am I making up? Why am I doing it? And can I start to shift these things?
That was a great tip. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So many people speak about those patterns we have. You attract the same thing, the law of attraction. And if you don't change it, it will come back to you. And you need to become aware of the pattern. However, I've found that the danger with that is that the pattern becomes the story, and I have a pattern of attracting this and that. And
Mhm.
that becomes even more solidified. So, is that sort of a trap we can fall into?
Yeah, quite easily. And this goes to one of my other big philosophies, or I guess observations that I've made in patterns I see. Most people are living a life of avoidance. And sometimes it's so subtle we don't even realize we're doing it. I'll talk to a client and I'll say, what do you want? And they're like, oh, I want to be rich and famous and this and that. I say, wonderful. Why do you want that? Well, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to struggle. Ah, so your motivation is because you're avoiding something. It's not because you actually want that thing. Most people don't even know what rich and famous would be in their life. They're just trying to get away from what they don't want. And because of that, if you're in avoidance, then what you're telling your brain is, okay, there's something that I need to make sure I avoid. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like I'm moving towards death. I'm not going to survive in the way that I would like to in this life. As soon as that's the case, then your mind, because your mind's job is to keep you alive, it's looking reflectively at everything that you've done. It's helping your senses of the body look outwardly and see any dangers and potential, whether it's physical or even emotional dangers, so that it can ensure your survival. And if you're focused on that, you're focused on what you want to avoid, you're telling your brain, look for these things that I should avoid. And this is why the patterns keep happening, and why instead of attracting what you want, you keep attracting the things you don't. And attraction maybe isn't even the right word. You're noticing the things that you don't want. I have a belief around manifestation and attraction that every possibility is right in front of you. It's like you have a vending machine of the universe and you get to choose. But if you're focused on the things that you know you're not supposed to have, or that you don't want to have because it's too pricey or it's junk food, or something like that, you're like, oh, I really shouldn't have that. So I need to make sure that I don't do that. And you're giving your brain this message that that thing is significant. And so then it focuses on that. And now you have a craving and you're like, maybe I'll just have a little bite, right? And this is what we do in life. We're so focused on what we're avoiding that we keep noticing it in our lives, and we don't notice the things that we actually want. And so that's another piece of a lot of my teachings is, can we start to move away from what we're avoiding and start to clarify what we actually want in life, and then start planting the seeds of that. Move from avoidance to aspiration. Plant the intentions that you want instead of the weeds that you're avoiding. And all of a sudden your life just starts to shift.
Wow. I love that perspective, and I've started recently to move more towards it. Step one is sort of to become aware, and you understand the pattern, and then move towards what I actually do want and focus on that. That makes a lot of sense. Could you share at the end, like, what is your work now, and how do you help people? And if anybody is interested in diving deep into your work, how can they do that?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. So my wife and I, we actually own and run a corporate coaching company and a personal development company online called the Brilliance EDU. And what we're doing now, we've shifted away from creating long courses, and instead we're making bite-sized videos where we get to actually put it up there like a little video library archive, and it becomes a resource for people to reference. So let's say you're having some communication issues in a relationship. You go onto the Brilliance EDU and you type in almost like a Google search. You go relationship communication, or what to do when my partner has cheated, or what to do when I don't know how to ask for something or be vulnerable with my partner. And there'll be a little bite-sized video for that. And so this is a big focus that I'm doing right now, because I found that courses, and especially the online educational system, so many people are interested in it. And similar to books and other courses we may have done in life, we buy it and then we don't do something with it. I have all these courses and I have all these people who bought them, and I'll be honest, I think less than 10% have completed the courses. And so this is an investment they made, but they never did something with it. That's lost value. So I want to make something that people will actually use, that can practically affect their life and influence it in a positive way.
Beautiful. And I'll leave the link below and also to the membership where you can access the beautiful masterclass that Rodolfo has made for Wisdom from North membership. Well, thank you so much for this wise and deep conversation today, and all the best with your work. And thank you for showing up today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching, everybody. Much light from Bali and Norway. Bye-bye.